Hello and welcome to the Frontline Conversation. Today we are joined by Anand Teltumbde, India's leading public intellectual and author. After Modi government declared caste enumeration in caste census, Anand wrote a piece in Frontline which sent waves in India. He argued that this caste census is going to be a difficult process for India which could create more rifts in society. After that, Anand wrote a book which is here, the Caste Con Census, which is going to be published now, and I urge every reader and viewer to read this book to understand the depth and history of the caste census. Sir, welcome to Frontline. Let me start with the first question. That caste census, which is being perceived as a progressive politics, something which will take India progressive forward. You are arguing that this could be another one step back process. So please explain why you are saying.
Yes, the present discourse is making caste census as a very progressive step, progressive politics rather, and many people have come in support of it. My skepticism, let me tell you, I am a data person, so it would be paradoxical that I would be opposing caste census as such. Any data are welcome because data are the raw material for data science and people like us. So we do not detest data as such, okay? But I'm skeptical about the politics of the caste census, okay? Mainly on three grounds. Firstly, it betrays some kind of deep ignorance about caste in people who just superficially support it. The principle, I would oppose it on firstly the principle, the knowledge about the caste. See, caste is not something like a finite entity with a definitive boundaries, etc., to be measured. That defies the measurement. Despite colonial rulers having made it a fixed kind of entity and rigidified caste, it still has a capacity within to mutate. Okay, and as a result, it actually becomes difficult. The example is that earlier times somebody said that 4,000 castes or something like that, but now the caste number actually defies. The SECC survey of 2011 pointed out something like 4.6 million castes. Okay, some people would fault it on a methodology, but I would say that it might be actually reflecting a truth of caste.
Wow.
Okay, so that is first kind of reason that why I am skeptical about. Second thing, supposing you take a very pragmatic view because something needs to be done in politics and count caste. Okay, so it brings in the question of methodology. The methodology, how you list out caste, how you aggregate caste, and how you validate caste. It is not a neutral process. It is very politically laden process. Okay, because it brings in all kinds of political relationship in it. The way the people are in power and the way they would look at it. So on that count also, it would actually be very difficult to sort of make it or assume it to be a neutral process because methodologically caste is not going to be counted just like that. And third thing is that, well, with all these kinds of things you counted caste, what do you do? Because caste is just a snapshot. You have to have a political will. And what kind of political will is behind that really matters, not caste census per se. Okay, without even caste census, if that political will exists, then many things could be done. Many things could have been done over the last 70 years. You have dodged it systematically. And you are talking about a caste census suddenly. Okay, I would still add one more point. Because these kinds of discourses, actually deflect our basic attention from the basic points of something like state's responsibility of providing inputs for capacity building of all people. It is not something like a targeted issue. There are certain basic ingredients that people need: education, healthcare, and livelihood security. That has been neglected by such kind of pseudo issues in India. So this is my skepticism about caste census law.
So, sir, in the chapter colonial construction of caste, you have mentioned how British used the caste census and ultimately how a fluid system once became a rigid under this caste census and categorization. So please explain it.
Yeah, there are views about some people that caste did not exist in India and British discovered it. That is absolute false. There is no doubt about it. Caste did exist, but you can imagine those days, ancient days, pre-colonial days for that matter. The castes were something like a social relationships. Okay, it defined social relationship with all its other features like hierarchy and all that thing. Maybe it was a localized kind of thing. It had a local context, and it survived in that manner. Caste was a pan-Indian reality in one sense, but it was not the same system that prevailed everywhere. Caste in one region, the name of caste or anything actually differed entirely in another region. It is not difficult to understand. It is not something like conjectural thing or hypothetical thing, because India did not, meaning those days there was not many communication means. There were no transport system, there were no telecommunication and all those kinds of things. So as a result, it did not pervade that the same kind of meanings were associated with caste in one region and it transcended to another region. So as a result, it remained basically a very context-ridden local kind of caste system. What happened was in 1857, as British took a shock, the revolt that happened in 1857, and British realized firstly that they do not know India enough, and that's why they actually sent a battery of ethnographers and enumerators, etc., to India, and this caste census process started. 58, the British Crown took over, and thereafter 1871 they started this process. Before that itself, I will come to that later, but before that itself, the thinking had started, during this couple of decades that elapsed. So what the caste census did is actually this kind of relationship they extrapolated all over India, that they made it a pan-Indian system and fixated caste. And not only that, the European things actually came from the Enlightenment, the era of reason in one way, 1670 century. This kind of movement had been there. Something like the things should be having the empirical base. This thing should have reason behind it. And this kind of notion, and there should be something like a scientific methodology guiding it. So with this kind of thing, this classification for everything, all those kinds of notions have come, and they categorize caste, as a fixed entity across India. And not only that, basically they were guided by informants. There were three sources of that: colonial enumerators, and third were the pseudoscience that emerged in Europe about the race. So with this kind of sources, they started fixating caste, hierarchies, that this caste is lower and all. Principle was what Brahmins told them, the purity and pollution kinds of notions. So they created, in a way, a system, which was of a pan-Indian nature and which got quite rigidified and this was actually transferred into education. So education, jobs, and recruitment in army and police, etc., started happening in. So this is the kind of situation colonial people created. So it was no more a pre-colonial local relationship that castes were, but it became a fixed kind of system where caste had a fixed kind of hierarchical positions in the system.
So there is also mention that how various caste groups across India at that time in 1881 and during that time, how they formalized their caste status, like Brahman Bhumiyar caste in North India. So what was that process and how it impacted in the caste census and overall the social hierarchies?
Yeah, you see, when British started this fixating caste, in a pan-Indian hierarchy, and got them into administration to base employment, recruitment, etc. on that, the various communities saw an opportunity, to kind of negotiate their position in a caste hierarchy. So, as you said, Brahman Bhumiyar, today it is a common kind of hyphenated phrase, but Bhumiyars were not Brahmins earlier. In pre-colonial days, Bhumiyars were the land-owning caste and were normally treated as Shudras, like our Kunbis for that matter. They were a populous caste everywhere. But in certain localized manner, Bhumiyars had acquired quite a power, local power. And with that kind of thing, they negotiated, they appealed to the enumerators and British bureaucrats, etc. They produced genealogies, mobilized their political networks, etc. and claimed that they were actually Brahmins. And they convinced the British rulers and got them Bhumiyar Con. It's not only Bhumiyars. Most of the castes that you see as a middle caste, they raised their standing like Kayasths. Kayasths in east and north and elsewhere even. They became quasi-Brahmins. Their standing, they were not like that, probably. I'm not sure, but probably they were not like that. Marathas closer home in Maharashtra, they also did the same thing. They were powerful in certain pockets, and that power, localized power, and their economic status, etc., was taken as base, and they actually mobilized the political networks to claim higher status. So this process has happened, and there were so many, meaning it happened across the caste, but the variable remained something like that: power to negotiate. And this became something like a sanctified, certified kind of caste identities that emerged. So you will find nobody questions now Bhumiyar being Brahmins and something like Marathas being higher than Kunbis, for that matter. And in every province or state, this kind of phenomena exists.
Today, we are seeing that how castes are being used for the political mobilization. But you have argued in the book that this is not the new process. Caste-based political mobilization started or solidified after caste census started in British rule. So please explain it more.
Yeah, as we discussed, caste census brought in huge visibility of community clusters, right? So many communities, like we discuss about the middle castes, something like Bhumiyars, Kayas, etc., raising their social status. The other phenomenon was that it also opened up, the caste inequities in terms of education, because this got linked with the administrative thing, and people, the inequities that were in the society became sort of visible. So many caste clusters, which were lower, Shudra, Ati Shudra, typically of Phule's conception, they started saying that their status has been very, very this thing. And if they kind of stake claims for better kind of education, better kind of representation, etc., there is an opportunity. So suddenly with caste census, this kind of phenomena came in. The numbers became salient. Okay, the salience was used for political mobilization. And it happened all across again. Okay, just to take an example, that it happened in Maharashtra, Mahas for that matter, Kurmis and Yadavs, etc. in north. These people started sort of just asking better kind of reservation-like thing, their representation and institutions and governance. All those kinds of demands started coming in. So these were the politicization process that happened in the lower strata too.
So it is commonly used that British use this divide and rule policy. So you think this caste census also helped them to divide and rule?
Basically, caste census was used for that.
Okay.
Divide and rule policy, because the basic intention of Britishers were that India cannot be governed. India is a vast kind of subcontinent size of country, and India could not be governed, without dividing people. So divide and rule actually comes handy. This is a formula strategy for all the rulers. So they cannot govern people without that kind of stratagem. Caste census helped them immensely, because caste census, something like the enumeration of caste, religion, communities, etc., deepened the division in society. And as again we discussed earlier, this became something like it created a consciousness in communities. Okay, those communities which actually were clustered, they were small, micro. They had a micro existence in the locales, but they now became quite silent, all across India. So these people started that community started that division, and consciousness started getting deepened. And people started comparing with each other. That became a competitive thing, that certain communities have assert more benefits, etc., in governance structure. So we ought to get it, and all that kind of thing. So it deflected their attention. It becomes an internecine kind of competition between caste, communities, religion, etc., etc., and actually deflected their attention of opposing the colonial rule collectively. That is the greatest benefit of divide and rule.
Yeah.
Because today also the same kind of thing is being done in a different way. The caste census actually deflects our entire attention from the basic issues. People get flown with that kind of ideas. So this is what has been happening. So it's very obvious that caste census facilitated the strategy of
divide and rule. So you also pointed out that caste census helped British to bring laws which stigmatize the communities or tribes like Pardhi in Maharashtra or Santhal in East India. So please explain how caste census helped to do this.
Yeah. As I said, the caste census was based on three sources, like Brahmin informants, colonial enumerators, and pseudo-scientific notions of race. So these helped them formulate. So they started mapping the caste, after getting the census done, and associated during this mapping certain criminalities, etc., with certain caste groups, and they started viewing like that. That is a criminality, the caste trait. Yeah. So, and therefore they viewed many nomadic, pastoral, or tribes as a criminal people, the criminality came as something like by birth. So this is what the racial theory. So that way they institute
The caste
law was brought, Criminal Tribe Act of 1871. Now you can think of 1871, the caste census started. So it is not directly the product of census. But this thinking had started during those intervening decades, 2 decades, So this had crystallized that they started sort of viewing the caste in a racial terms. And started associating criminality, etc., with something like some people. And this way, the thousands of people were sort of forced into settlements. They were intensely surveilled, and they were criminalized, and this actually this way they sort of instituted this
caste tribe, the criminal tribe.
Yeah, criminal tribes. Yeah.
One important phase during the British rule about the caste is various movements started by Mahatma Phule in Maharashtra or Periyar in Tamil Nadu, Satyashodha Samaj or self-respect movement. So do you think these movements were also a result of caste census, and how caste, that enumeration ultimately led to the formation of these kinds of movements for the rights, for the self-respect?
Absolutely. Caste census actually catalyzed these movements. There were unintended consequences, one could say, in sense that the categorization or the amalgamation of very many castes, all across, as we discussed earlier, brought in quite a visibility. And these data simultaneously produce the disproportionate kind of inequality existing in the society. The lower caste started seeing that they're educationally, in terms of land owning and in terms of social relationships, etc., they have been sort of subjugated by certain castes. And from that, the consciousness arose. And certain leaders like Mahatma Phule in Maharashtra or Periyar later on in South India actually started sort of spreading this kind of awareness among the people. So Mahatma Phule, for instance, is a very remarkable person, so to have conceived something like Shudra Ati Shudra. So bringing together something like in class terms as Marx conceived, like this versus that. So Mahatma Phule's equation was Shetji Bhatji versus Shudra Ati Shudra. This is very, nobody notices in that way, but I would say it is a remarkable kind of conception. So this came in, and these movements, of lower caste got a new vocabulary. It's actually product of caste census, something like rights, representation, and
respect.
Self-respect, etc. Actually, these kinds of vocabulary is a contribution of caste census in a way, which was, I would say, that unintended consequence, because even British did not foresee it, and nobody rather could imagine that such thing would happen. But this came up, and this is a very positive kind of byproduct of caste census.
So, as you said, that the Periyar's movement or Phule's movement was in a way a reflection of this caste census, reaction to the caste census. This is a centenary year of Periyar's self-respect movement. You see that the new caste census, which is going to happen in next 1 or 2 years, that is going to, in a way, restart the movement of rights, the respect in the lower caste, in the Shudras, Ati Shudras of today's India. Do you foresee something like this?
I would not see that replication in this phase. This was something like a birth of that movement. That it was something like origin of that kind of consciousness in the lower strata where nothing existed. So that was brought about by the caste census. But now the caste census is totally different. After seeing 100 years, lot many changes have already come in. The lowest strata is totally corrupted. It is mostly in the lap of the reactionary process, and as a matter of fact, this kind of engendering the similar kind of consciousness is not going to help because it exists. So there is nothing going to be contributed by this census, in terms of raising that consciousness. Okay. Rather, the most probable and probably the root cause of this caste census is the subcategorization. That kind of demand might rather emerge from the lower strata, and it would entail further division among them. Caste census in British time basically coagulated all these castes together, but now they would subdivide it, then, and they would start sort of demanding subcategorization.
So as you said, this current caste status census is going to subcategorize the caste further. Like in 1931, there were some 4,000 castes. And in 2011 census, we saw that around 46 lakh castes or subcastes were emerged. So you think this process is going to accelerate after the current or the proposed caste census?
Again, linked to what we discussed, I do not believe that there is a definite number of castes. Okay, caste is a notion, as Babasaheb Ambedkar also said, and many other people corroborated. So caste is not something like an entity which is made of brick and mortar, because that can be measured very strictly. So it was a pragmatic move of the British colonizers that they arrived at some figure. They had to arrive at some figure because that again percolated down from enlightened notions, etc. So they had to sort of concretize the whatever they see as social phenomena, and they did that. Now, again, as I said earlier, howsoever castes were fixated, that a basic tendency of caste to split, like amoeba, had not disappeared. So over the years, again, there has been a mutation of castes. Okay, so as a result, it is not that the caste there is something like added to the caste, etc. But what ACCC 2011 captured as some 4.6 million caste actually testifies to what I say, that is probably comes closer. People have blamed it for the methodological mess up, that people started sort of recording what people said, and there was a lot of spelling mistakes, and because of that, this kind of unwieldy number arrived.
And we heard 8 crore mistakes. We heard this number.
So those mistakes, etc., if you apply the data science methodology of cleaning, that can be taken care. That is not a big issue. But in other way around, I would say that it comes closer to what castes are. That is the caste. What people say are the caste. So that might go beyond even 4.6 million. Who knows?
So in the chapter, what led us here? You have clearly mentioned that caste census is necessary. You are mentioning the phrase used by Satish Deshpande, it is nation selfie. So why it is necessary if it is going to create so many problems, possibly so many problems?
Good question. I would agree with Professor Satish Deshpande to the extent he said that caste census is going to provide national selfie. It's like national selfie. So I also said that in different words, this is something like a snapshot of our status. It would expose something like inequalities, exclusion, and redistribution problems that exist in the society. So that kind of picture can be presented. Okay. And any data, as I again said, that as a data science person would not detest data. More the data, better it is to understand it. Problem is not that. Problem is dealing with the politics behind caste census. We are discussing politics behind caste census, not caste census per se. Caste census is, and I elaborately explained that caste census is not going to be a neutral process. There are the issues about it, and everywhere the politics get intermingled. So that cannot be sort of ignored. So the basic question would be, what do you do with having your own selfie? Okay, are you going to change your face? Are you going to make yourself more beautiful and all that kind of thing? That cannot be done. It's a different process than taking a selfie. So the same analogy could apply, that in order to use these caste data for improving the social justice system or improving the lives of people, there would have to be a political will backing it. That is absent.
So you mentioned this redistribution of sources. Okay, this is what being mentioned by DMK in Tamil Nadu, or RJD in Bihar, Samajwadi Party in Uttar Pradesh, and now the Rahul Gandhi in all over India, that caste census is going to help in the redistribution of national resources. How do you see it? Because they are just looking at the brighter picture of the situation, and they are ignoring completely the practical situation, how caste are going to be measured and all.
Yes. Actually, DMK, RJD, and lately Congress demanding a caste census cannot be conflated with the political will. Okay, this is a reaction to BJP's using caste to create their formidable base among the OBCs. So all these people woke up that they have to activate their caste base, because DMK survived on the non-Brahmin caste, RJD and others also the same way. Congress actually was not, but Congress also fell in line because they also started seeing their power base started dwindling, and they have now fallen back to activating caste. So this cannot be conflated with the basic motivation remains the electoral drawing something like out of these lower castes, some electoral change to them. So this cannot be conflated with the political will for redistribution per se. And what kind of redistribution going to be there? Are they going to distribute power? Are they going to distribute wealth in the country? Are they going to therefore stop inheritance of the wealth? All these kinds of things should naturally occur to people, and they should ask such questions. And if their answer is in affirmative, then only the political will could be acknowledged.
You said this RJD, Congress and other parties, whatever their demands is actually a reactionary politics to the BJP's base. BJP expanding its base in lower. But BJP also opposed the caste census from the start, in the name that it will break the Hindu unity. And suddenly they took a different stand now, and they are going to do this caste census. How do you see this contradiction or BJP's double game?
Yeah. We could see this in this way. Okay, it's true that BJP has been opposing, even in the recent years. BJP opposed this emergence of demand for caste census very vehemently and forcefully. In 2021, for instance, they submitted the affidavit before Supreme Court and clearly said, and emphatically said that it's a government's conscious policy not to include caste in the next census. Okay, the Supreme Court cannot intervene in such kind of things because it's a government policy. It's government policy. Law cannot intervene in that. Then during 24, all this intervening year, they have been opposing very, very forcefully. During 24 elections, Modi had gone to the extent that demand for caste census, is an urban Naxal demand. It is going to divide the country, etc. Okay, and suddenly on 30th April this year, they surreptitiously took a cabinet decision that caste would be included in census. BJP can do any somersault, and people they are very confident that people would not react because they have created something like a bhakt, the constituency of bhakt for themselves to back up. So whatever that they does, they are very sure that their vote base is not going to be affected. So this is the kind of thing. What is BJP's intention or what is the reason that BJP suddenly took this somersault can be discerned. Now Bihar elections were there and 24 they have already a jolt. Okay, if they had not the support from Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar had happened, BJP was on the verge of losing power, So they became quite alert. Now 24 election data, if you minutely analyze, BJP noted that they had taken BJP, the OBC as a homogeneous group supporting them was not a fact. Okay, the upper layers of OBC was actually shifting away from them, and the lower strata of OBC actually remained faithful to them. So there was not much of a dent in the lower strata. So this is a clue that lower strata needs to be reinforced. Okay, further, because upper strata of BJP is something like a Brahminical caste. They are educated people and they can see through the tactics of BJP and they can understand. And over the years, they have understood and they started shifting to other parties. But lower strata has been very faithful to them. They are illiterate people and they can be made into bhakts. So this is one of the trumps. Second trump is Bihar election. That Nitish Kumar, now if actually BJP persists with opposition to the caste census, that would give a different kinds of signal in Bihar.
Yeah.
Okay. Nitish Kumar carried out this caste census fairly successfully and proposed even policies based upon that. It is a different matter that all those kinds of things are not rectified because presently the Supreme Court is not blessing them. Tomorrow, if BJP starts blessing and Modi comes saying everything in the country is happening, the Supreme Court also would follow in line, and that the crux of that is a 50% cap of the reservation, etc., would be done away with. So that is the third kind of second prompt that can be taken as the reason behind. Third is that all political parties grouped together, the India bloc, etc., started demanding caste census. That caught people's imagination. Caste census became a very dominant kind of discourse in the country. So BJP could not ill afford to sort of ignore it. And that they found something like a strategic lever to prick the balloon of the discourse. Okay, so these basically three things are the are behind the BJP's kind of volte-face about caste census. Okay. Their intention is not distributive or anything. BJP doesn't have any kind of intention of redistribution, etc. They would actually reformulate because ultimately all this caste data interpretation remains, and they would ensure that it remains within the framework of their ideological framework. And it, at the max, the BJP would use the data for political coalitions, reformulating political coalition, not beyond.
So as you said that BJP is not having a bigger aim of redistribution of resources or something like that. But there is also fear being expressed that EWS quota, the way BJP introduced it, the way Supreme Court upheld it, and this caste census is ultimately going to abolish the caste-based reservation, and this new thing will emerge in the context of reservation. You see something like this going to happen?
Absolutely. I have explicated that in the book also, that one of the long-term motivation of BJP linked with this caste census is that because ideologically RSS has been against caste-based reservations. Okay, BJP inherits that ideological stance. EWS has been a milestone, a very sinister milestone in India's history. So it instituted basically the reservations for Brahminical caste, upper caste, and on economic basis. But the economic basis in this country, when one thing should be understood, that economic status of the people in India is not measured. Okay, so unlike Western countries, there is something like a documentation of economic status and very periodical, very reliable kind of thing. In India, it happens that whatever you say your economic status is the thing. So this is your economic income, and that is it. There is no way to justify it. So on that basis, this EWS system has been instituted, and very surprisingly, the Supreme Court also validated. These days, such things are not very uncommon. It is absolutely unconstitutional because reservation did not have anything to do with economic status of people. It was a historical disadvantage. The BJP actually reformulated narrative that it is not the historical disadvantage or social backwardness of people, etc., but the current kind of economic disadvantage that people face needs to be rectified. So this is the driver. Now, how this caste census should ultimately be used to create another narrative against the caste-based reservation is this, that the likely the caste data is going to show what? It is going to show that there is a huge inequality, intra-caste inequality, because within caste itself there is a huge intra-caste inequality. So that drives in one way to the sub-categorization. So BJP is happy with that because backward caste, if they are splintered, better it is. And the second kind of narrative that emerges out of the same kind of data, that the these reservation policies based on caste so far have really outlived their purpose. They have not served the purpose. Okay, so there should now be actually modernized, brought it to something like a big meaning to better rational and should be repackaged. Okay, that could be economic because these data are going to show it is not confined to only lower caste. Initially, I thought that they might not because they club together, at an earlier surveys in elsewhere, all upper caste, their general category. So no, in Bihar, they really gone into even upper caste status. And probably when he says that upper caste also would be included, most people believe that in the forthcoming caste census, the upper caste also would be included in the same manner, same granularity. So that granularity would bring in something like an upper caste inequities also. So I would say that there is no caste. We actually rhetorically speak about inequality, but there is a mathematical measure for that. There's a Gini coefficient that measures something like inequality. So on any base. So if you take any caste as such and compute Gini coefficient, it is not going to be different. My guess is across the caste. The same kind of inequality would exist among Mahars as in Chitpavans. Okay. That is going to happen. So what does it mean? That caste-based reservations are it would be seeding that narrative that caste-based reservation is not going to fulfill this thing. That's why it's a matter of actually rectifying the economic inequality, because what you are measuring is alluding to that.
Yes.
So that narrative gets helped formulated. So this is the kind of narrative that they would, after this euphoria dies down, then they would create this kind of narrative to abolish the caste-based reservation system.
So this is BJP's position. But the way Rahul Gandhi tried to push the idea for last 2 years, how do you see Congress stand on the caste census? Because for 60 years they did nothing. They strategically avoided the idea and now they are pushing it. How do you see?
I would say Congress lost its moorings. So when Rahul Gandhi speaks, one does not know whether Congress is behind it. So it's like that. But let's go beyond this kind of reading. And what Congress realized is that, if you go back to constitution making, history of constitution making, etc., the reservation for backward caste, etc., were instituted by whose blessings? It was a Congress oligarchy. Okay, they were demand, no doubt, but Nehru-like persons were not for caste things. He was very skeptical about whole thing. So after in order to institute this backward class reservation, Kalelkar committee, Kalelkar commission was constituted, and it came out with report, and Congress rejected it, and over, as you said, 70 years now, there was no move from the Congress to major castes. So this now suddenly Congress wakes up. Now, what is the prompt? Prompt is that is a political debacle. It doesn't have any reliable kind of social base, political base to really expect that they would come to power again. So they realized that OBC have been very skillfully taken away from Congress. Congress projected itself a party of national unity and relied on secularism, nationalism, and this kind of thing.
The broader alliance.
Broader alliance, catch-all alliance. That one time, Gandhi's time, right? Gandhi representing that he represented entire India. Same stance actually populated down to Congress. That Congress said that we are the national party, so we represent it. It is not principally very different from BJP projecting they are the Hindu party. So BJP's opposition to caste census also that with caste census the Hindu unity would be splintered. Now, Congress obsession was the same, similar, that their national unity projection would be kind of destroyed with this kind of fragmentation. So this is the kind of thing. Now, one should now ask Congress whether they have really that political conviction or ideological conviction about redistribution, that India needs redistribution. Now, Rahul Gandhi picked up Kashi Ram slogan. Let that be said aloud. That is a Kashi Ram slogan. Jiski jitni sankhya vari utni uski hissedari. The natural question comes in, what is this hissedari or bhagidari about? In what? In kind of government service, which the base of which actually dwindled with the neoliberal policy brought in by Congress itself. Okay, hugely supported by BJP, no problem, but Congress is a party which technically brought it about, and neoliberalism actually eroded the base of reservation. Privatization, contractualization, so many things have been going on in public sector and government sector. This Modi brought in something like that policy, of recruiting directly from the private sector.
Lateral entries.
Lateral entry into this thing. What is that? So with various ways, actually the base of reservation have been eroded. So now they talk about suddenly with this kind of thing. Where is the kind of, what do they mean by giving due share to various communities? So again, I would repeat, is that share in something like the representation in the legislature? Ambedkar is the person who fought most, okay, hardest for this political reservation. Ambedkar's plank was firstly the political reservation, and he gained during colonial era, but he regretted thereafter because, and he started demanding till he died that this reservation should be annulled. No, but now this reservation became beneficial to other parties, and they would ignore Ambedkar. Who are you?
Yeah.
So this is, but it is. Now this political reservation has been already beneficial to them. And they are talking about the hissedari in that. Hissedari will come in land distribution. Are they going to do that? Hissedari will come in something like a equalizing the kind of educational input to all children. Are they going to do that? Hissedari comes in something like having a universal base of healthcare. They are going to do that? Nothing of this kind of being spoken, it's just a rhetorical kind of thing, is raising storm in people and creating political discourses.
So, at the end, you are not fully convinced that what caste census is going to happen, how it is going to change the people's life.
Inequalities.
Yeah, inequality. So then, what government should be doing for this? Because if the caste census is not the answer, then what is?
You see, caste census cannot repair the inequalities in the country. Okay, it is something like BJP thinks of caste. The castes are good; they should live, but they should all live amicably. There should be samarasta in this thing, and they imagine that the ancient India had that kind of samarasta. So that should be like that. They are not talking about. They will dodge the word samata. Yeah, samata they will not talk about. It's samarasata. But it is also like that because caste census actually is based on inequality. So they are not questioning the inequalities per se. It's a notion people carry that inequalities would be done away with. No. Caste inequalities, all inequalities in the society, they would exist. It is a social justice measure that those people who are suffering these inequalities are to be patched up. Okay. So that is the thing. So they are never claiming that inequal. So let us not get onto inequality. What actually government should be doing, and let me before that say that the inequalities in the society is not only due to caste. They have been hugely reinforced by the neoliberal policies, the government policies. So neoliberal policies, right, from last 91 we adopted probably, and from there on it is going on. The entire neoliberal model has failed world over, etc., that we don't get into that. But neoliberalism actually created something like a phenomenon of jobless growth. The technology is responsible for that because the elasticity of employment has practically come down world over. So there is jobless growth, there is a privatization, there are tangible efforts about contractual all across, the state withdrawing from social sector. All this created all-round crisis. I would say that all these crises actually not only is confined to the lowest strata, traditional lowest strata, but the the middle strata also, which had experience in between during the early years of independence, the prosperity. This middle caste, something like landowning caste, they had local power base with the local self-government institutions, etc. Access to state resources that through all these things, they also started experiencing the drain to their power base. Their children took to education, but there are no jobs around. So these people also started becoming unsure about it, started demanding reservation. All dominant caste, there is a huge outcry for demanding reservation. They also claiming, that OBC parlance, that we are socially and educationally backward. We also should be included in OBC and even reservation. This twin kind of reaction comes from lower caste because they are also not satisfied. So they want that, certain fellows have usurped all the reservation and kept us excluded. So there should be our share we ought to get. And the subcategorization demand came in. So these are twin kind of reaction to that neoliberal aftermath. So that needs to be understood. Now what government should do in this situation if it claims to do something about existing inequalities? The answer is very clear. They should actually massively invest into the basic kinds of things which are required for capacity building, and that should be universal based. I argued, for instance, that for even the conventional reservation that what exists today needed that policy to be implemented first, and then only when all the people get empowered, all the people have some basic capacity, then only some select measures of inputting some historically weaker sections with reservation or some special benefits, etc. would work. Without that, this would not work. And the history is now testimony to this thing, that reservation, however you do, is not going to work. It has not fulfilled its purpose. Now, government should take care of that. So firstly, create that kind of base. Secondly, it should have a strong social security measure, not giving them a free ration for 80 crores, etc. But there should be very structured kind of social security measure as it exists in European countries, for that matter. That needs to be done. Third is pay attention to, meaning with all these kinds of data is enough in the country to understand where and what else. So to actually formulate policies. So that needs to be done. Government should focus on the massive investment into education, healthcare, and livelihood security of people. Because without that, even such kind of segment, the select kind of reservation, etc., also are not going to work. Second thing is that they should create a base for public employment. There should be something like proper investment into manufacturing sector, which would really employ multitude of our population, not that service sector, etc. As is emulating America is not going to work in India. Third thing is social security. Social security needs to be emphasized. It should be formulated along the lines of what European countries have done, not distributing saris and distributing something like free ration to 80 crores of people. That is wasteful. So such kind of measure could be thought about. There is enough data to understand what it is, but there is absolutely what is lacking is a political will. So everybody is playing politics, and this cost census is not beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for watching.